We are witnessing one of the biggest crises in the history of professional padel. It happened in Gijon and it's gonna happen again in Cancun. No top 100 players will play the next tournament except for LeBron and Stupa. But what's really going on? What are the players demanding to play the upcoming tournaments? What's Premier Padel response? The situation is very tense and it's hard to predict what's gonna happen in the coming days, but first, let's understand what has happened so far. Hello everyone, I'm Pablo and I welcome you to a new 4Set. I've spent many hours preparing this video because it's one of the most challenging ones I've made and one of the saddest for me. I'm just a lover of this sport and like all of you, I wish this situation was not happening. In this story there are even some hostile attitude and for many key points there are two completely opposite versions. Of course, only the real protagonists have all the information and in situations as complicated as this one, we have to take everything with a grain of salt. I will try to structure this video into 3 parts. First, a chronological path up to today to objectively explain what happened. Second, an objective summary of the situation. And finally, my point of view. I apologize in advance if I make any mistakes, but if this happens, I will be happy to pin a comment to the video with the correction. So we start this story in June 2021 when the top 10 players in the world at that time met during the World Padel Tour in Valencia and agreed to create the PPA, the Professional Padel Association. A few months later, in November 2021, during the Padel World Championship in Qatar, the seed of a new circuit to replace World Padel Tour was planted by FIP and Qatar Sports Investment. That idea became a reality with the collaboration of the PPA, and in March 2022, the first ever Premier Padel tournament was held in Qatar. After that tournament, World Padel Tour sued the players for breach of contract, demanding 25 million euros. In August 2023, Premier Padel bought World Padel Tour and dropped the lawsuits against the players, clearing the way for a single tour, Premier Padel, starting in 2024. In October 2024, the PPA opened up membership to any professional padel player regardless of the tour they played on. Throughout 2024, players complained about the extreme temperature condition in some tournaments like in Acapulco and Dubai, arguing that the scheduling was not appropriate due to the heat. In November 2024, Carlos Alonso, the CEO of the PPA, gave an interview to Capital Radio and said the following.
Y es que el jugador profesional de pádel no participa de las decisiones en relación con el circuito y en relación con un montón de casuísticas, del calendario, de las, no sé, de las ubicaciones, de los formatos. El jugador no participa en esas decisiones, simplemente. No, en absoluto. En ningún calendario que ha comunicado hasta ahora en estos 3 años Premier Padel y FIP, ninguno, 0.
Carlos admitted that players hadn't been involved in the calendar's creation, and because of that and other issues, he said the following.
Pero sí es cierto que los jugadores lo que han decidido es que tienen que tener una posición o tienen que tener la posición natural del jugador en cualquier deporte profesional, en cualquier deporte y barra profesional, con más razón. Es decir, en todos los deportes profesionales el jugador tiene un peso en las decisiones y en el pádel no estaba pasando. Entonces la postura de los jugadores es, oye, esto no puede ser y esto hay que cambiarlo.
On December 23rd, 2024, Premier Padel announced the 2025 calendar, and Al Khelaifi, president of Premier Padel, stated that the 2025 calendar was developed in collaboration with players and partners. But things got even more complicated starting in January 2025. Because from January 2nd to 5th, the season opened with a FIP Silver tournament in Sydney. A few weeks later, another silver was played in Melbourne and a bronze in Melvedil, France, all before January 17th, the day that the bomb dropped. That day, according to the FIP, after extensive consultations with major stakeholders, including players and their respective associations, promoters, sponsors, and broadcast partners, 2 major changes were announced. First, the distribution of points for different tournaments in 2025 was modified. For example, the winner of a P2 in 2025 gets 600 points compared to 500 last year. But they also changed the points distribution for FIP tournaments. A platinum now gives 300 points instead of 250 to the winner, a gold 150 instead of 125. So it's worth noting that before this announcement, the tournaments in Australia and France have already been played. This meant that the winner of the Sydney Silver earned 62 points, while the winner of the Silver in Rio Grande, Brazil just weeks later earned 80 points due to these changes. Second, new formats for the main draw and qualification rounds in major P1 and P2 tournaments were announced. For example, in a P2 tournament in 2024, 48 pairs made the main draw, but in 2025, only 40. For quali, it was 32 pairs in 2024, now it's 24 in 2025. These changes led to many players complaining on social media, feeling they were being treated unfairly. Ale Galán, in an interview with Relevo, shared his view on the situation.
Creo que no llueve a gusto de todos, que en parte es necesario, pero que en el proceso de cambio ahora mismo no, hay más gente descontenta que contenta. Creo que para el promotor era un poquito asfixiante también, entonces si queremos que el deporte como negocio siga creciendo, es necesario no asfixiar al promotor con tantas habitaciones, con tantos servicios a tantos jugadores. Entonces de esa parte creo que para ellos era ventajosa y creo que esos jugadores que tienen menos accesibilidad ahora a los Premier deberían tener una escala más baja de torneos que les sirvan de calidad para que no se vea tan penalizados.
Ale explained that reducing the draw sizes could make the investment more attractive for promoters, cutting costs since it's not the same to pay for example, 100 hotel rooms instead of 70. From the player's perspective, reducing the draw sizes makes it harder to qualify for Premier Padel tournaments. To gain points, they will have to play more FIP tournaments, but Ale point out current issues there.
Creo que se está haciendo y se está en medio de ese paso, pero en este momento están descontentos porque están en tierra de nadie y es una lástima, ¿no? para ellos que se vean que no tienen o torneos de calidad como son los de Premier para jugar, para seguir ganando puntos y dinero. Y bueno, pero es que está ahí, creo que están en medio del proceso y la mayoría están un poco descontentos porque creo que hay una reducción de cuadros, también hay un aumento de puntos en torneos de cada vez menos categoría y creo que eso no tiene contento a los jugadores.
Ale highlighted a key point. Lower tier tournaments like Platinum, Gold, Silver and Bronze now give more points. This could lead to more top players entering lower tier tournaments to earn more points. However, Premier argues that all these changes were agreed upon with the PPA and that there's documented proof. Well, I will share my view on this later, but let's continue to February 10th when the world's top 50 players agreed not to sign up for Gijon P2 to push for change. The situation was so tense that on February 13th, Bull Padel, one of the Premier Padel's main sponsors, sent a letter to its players urging them to play the tournament. That same day, the last major meeting between players and FIP and Premier Padel took place at the Riyadh tournament. And the main points of conflict were, first, adjusting the number of tournaments that count towards the ranking. Second, organizing participation in Cupra FIP Tour tournaments and adjusting their point distribution. Third, reviewing the size of the draw for P1 tournaments, which are mandatory and the most frequent category throughout the year. Fourth, a legal review of the 2022 contract and some clauses to adapt them to the current situation. Premier Padel and FIP committed to negotiating these points immediately and bindingly, but the PPA didn't consider this commitment enough. As a result, no top 100 players signed for Gijon, confirming the boycott. Vineno, PPA's vice president, sent an email to Premier Padel inviting them to keep working together on the issues raised. But Premier Padel's response was clear. They didn't want to negotiate as long as there was an illegal boycott causing $1 million losses. And this is where the story gets even more intense. Because on February 21st, the PPA made its first public statement since the whole situation began. They claimed that the PPA didn't promote any boycott of Gijon and that P2 tournaments are optional. And a quick note here, let's remember that last year several players didn't play in Egypt or Finland, for example, and there was no conflict, at least published. And I have to read some key points from the statement where the PPA justifies its position. The unilateral modification of the point system by the FIB as the regulator once the 2025 sports season had started. It is clearly unfair that two tournaments of the same category distribute a different number of points in the ranking based on when they are held during the same season. The participation of players in Premier Padel lacks an express regulation after 3 years of activity. The FIB's role in the sport is that of a regulator while also being a part as a partner of Premier Padel. A few days later, on February 24th, Premier Padel responded to the PPA statement through a letter to the players. The illegal collective boycott by certain players of the Gijon tournament marks one of the darkest and most self-destructive days in Padel's history. The PPA claims with absolutely no authority that players are not obligated to play in P2 tournaments, which is simply and clearly demonstrably false from a legal and factual standpoint. The PPA ignores an investment of tens and tens of millions of euros by the FIB and Premier Padel and curiously overlooks the direct payments of 1.1 million euros that Premier Padel has made to the PPA's own management. The PPA accuses the FIB of having a conflict of interest despite having signed the same constitutional documents of Premier Padel from the beginning. The only stakeholders in the sport of Padel who are benefiting are the players themselves, who are now boycotting the tournament. The PPA accuses the tour of recently making unilateral decisions, ignoring dozens of meetings and the PPA's consultation in all these cases. Perhaps they don't understand that players are not the governing body of the sport and that decisions must also be the result of contributions from other stakeholders in the sport, including promoters and sponsors. The PPA complains that there are too many tournaments, despite Premier Padel taking up less than half of the annual calendar, while at the same time the best players participate in close exhibitions like the Superliga, which only benefit and enrich a few. Perhaps some fail to understand that this is not a TV reality show or a lobbying game that disappears after issuing a statement to the media. And the greatest irony of all, the commercial revenues, the value, and the interests of the players will ultimately be the biggest victims of this action, where lower ranked players will suffer the most and almost immediately from its effects. We will not be held hostage once again by giving in to another illegal boycott of our tour. We invite any player with a contract to continue on our circuits on this basis, where we commit to continuing to evolve thanks to contributions, feedback and suggestions for improvement from players and all interested parties. Well, we are reaching the temporary end of this story because on February 28th, Premier Padel extended the registration deadline for Cancun P2 by 30 hours, apparently following a request from the lawyer of LeBron and Stupa. None of the top 100 players had signed up and now had one more day to do so, but alarms were going off again. Because according to Álvaro Cepero himself, the extension of the registration period for Cancun, as happened with the Gijon tournament, didn't comply with the FIB regulations. Regardless, these registrations closed and there was a huge surprise. Stupa and LeBron were the only top 50 players registered for the tournament. So I'm wondering, will they end up playing the tournament or will they not show up? What was the real reason for Stupa and LeBron signing up? An important last minute update is that Stupa has published a statement on his Instagram where he acknowledged that he has doubts about what should be the right decision, thanks both the PPA, Premier and FIB, and trusts that this situation can be solved through dialogue. He confirms that his lawyer recommended him to register in order to avoid legal, sporting and personal risk, and that he transmitted this information to the rest of the players. He asked for respect for his decision and assures that he doesn't intend to gain sporting advantage, and in case he had to vote for the Cancun tournament not to score, he will vote for it to be so and will not sign up for another P2 tournament so that his teammates can recover that advantage. So what do you think of Stupa and LeBron's decision? So the situation as of the moment I'm recording this video is as follows chronologically. However, as I said at the beginning, I'm 100% sure there's a lot of information we don't know, like calls, messages. And remember that in all these cases there are always two sides to the story, and to judge fairly it would be ideal to have all the information on the table. However, and without intending to disrespect anyone, I will try to share my honest opinion. And first of all, as a Padel enthusiast, this whole situation makes me sad. And not only because we can see the best players in the world on the court, but because of the way things are being handled. From my point of view, both sides have been negotiating in a very confrontational manner. I get that it's easy to say this from my position, but I will try to adopt a more empathetic and constructive approach, even if each side has its red lines. I know that I might sound idealistic, and I understand it's a tough situation, that there are many interests and pressures, but not losing respect or composure and trying to resolve the situation with the best intentions would be my way. Another point that surprised me is that there are two completely opposite versions of key aspects. For example, are P2 tournaments mandatory to play? Well, according to Premier Padel, yes. According to the PPA, no. The calendar, the change in points, the change in draws, according to the FIP and Premier Padel, everything was agreed upon with the players, but according to the PPA, none of it was. Obviously, I don't have the answer because I don't have the contract, nor I was in the meetings. But it's striking that such important points differ so much depending on who explains them. But now let's take a moment to discuss some of the key points of this conflict, starting with the reduction of the draws. Well, to me it's crucial to first see if the tournaments in 2024 were profitable for promoters. Because if it turns out that promoters have unsustainable fixed costs and can't make a profit, reducing the draws might be a solution. I have no idea if this is the case, but I understand the importance of taking care of the promoters to keep them investing in the sport. Ultimately, promoters invest money seeking a financial return, and if no made money, there will be no tournaments. And well, I've tried to share all the information I know as objectively as possible and then give my opinion respectfully. I don't know what you guys think or what you think will happen in the coming days. Hopefully sooner or later the situation gets resolved in the best possible way and we can all enjoy the best padel in the world. So that's all from my side. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video. Thank you so much and see you in the next one. Ciao!